Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone, coming to you today from KPP Team Studio.
Great to be here.
So today we're doing a deep dive looking into a really interesting collection of facts. They really challenge and explore the whole idea of the American dream.
That iconic concept.
Exactly. What does it promise? And, how does the actual reality stack up? We'll be comparing life in the U.S. with life outside, looking specifically at factual differences. Things like social benefits, costs, food quality, services, particularly comparing with Europe based on these facts.
Right. And our goal here, our mission, is to unpack all these facts you've gathered. We want to pull out the key insights, connect the dots, and hopefully help you, the listener, get a much clearer picture.
A picture of what quality of life really looks like and how people pursue a good life in different places.
Exactly. We want you to walk away feeling, genuinely well-informed on this whole complex topic.
Okay, let's jump right in. The facts start with this. Well, this massive paradox.
Yeah, it's striking.
On the one hand, the United States, it's described, and the facts back this up, as the richest country in the history of the world. I mean, the numbers are just staggering.
Like 18 million millionaires?
18 million millionaires, yeah. And something like $100 trillion in household wealth. It's almost impossible to really visualize that level of wealth.
It truly is. You'd think, with that kind of money floating around, the standard of living would just be universally incredible.
And that's exactly where the paradox comes in, according to these facts. Despite all that national wealth, the facts show that a lot of Americans actually have a standard of living that's significantly worse than people in countries that are, well, technically poorer.
Poorer in terms of overall national wealth, yeah. The facts specifically mention places like Germany, Finland, and Britain.
Right. So how can that be? How can the richest nation have so many people struggling more than folks in less wealthy nations? The facts offer a pretty clear explanation.
It seems to boil down to how that wealth translates or doesn't translate into everyday benefits for citizens.
Right. Precisely. The argument laid out in the facts is that Americans get worse services. And the reason given, tax dollars just don't fund those public services to the same extent.
So less public funding means?
Oh.
Well, you get worse services. Things like healthcare, infrastructure, safety nets.
Exactly. And if those foundational things are shaky, the facts argue, then people's overall quality of life, their happiness even, takes a hit compared to citizens in Germany or Finland where those services are stronger.
Now, the obvious assumption there is, okay, Americans must just pay way less in taxes. That's the trade-off.
That's what you'd think. But this is where the facts really throw a curveball. When you add everything up, federal taxes, state, local, sales tax, and then you add the costs Americans pay out of pocket for things taxes cover elsewhere, especially those huge health insurance premiums.
Oh yeah, those are massive.
Massive. When you combine all that, the facts show Americans actually give away a larger percentage of their wages than people in most other developed countries.
Wow. Okay, do the facts give specific comparisons?
They do, and they're pretty stark. For, say, a married worker with 2 kids, in Canada, when you combine taxes and those extra costs, it's maybe around 11% of their wage.
Okay.
In the UK, it's closer to 26%. But in the US, add in those health insurance premiums, and the facts say it jumps to about 43% of their paycheck.
43%. That's nearly half.
It's huge. And the facts explicitly say that's more than people pay in France, Finland, Sweden, Norway, all places famous for high taxes and big social safety nets.
So the whole idea that Americans keep more of their money, the facts suggest that in real reality, once you account for essential costs, it's the opposite.
That's the argument presented, yes.
Yeah.
They keep less in terms of disposable income after covering taxes and these necessary service costs.
So the difference isn't really the total amount paid out, but where it goes.
Exactly. In those other countries, the government takes a chunk via taxes, but then, returns it as healthcare, job support, a safety net, universal services.
Whereas in the U.S., a big chunk goes to, well, private insurance companies, for instance, and the public services you get back for the tax portion are less comprehensive.
That's what the facts suggest. And they paint a pretty bleak picture of what Americans get for that 43% payout. Things like crumbling infrastructure.
Yeah, you hear about that a lot.
Shameful levels of homelessness, millions of kids going hungry or being neglected. It's a harsh assessment.
So the bottom line from this part of the facts is wealthiest country, but paying a huge slice of income for some of the worst services in the developed world.
That's the paradox the facts lay out right at the start. It really sets the stage.
Okay, so let's dive into one of those services specifically, healthcare. The facts really highlight this as a prime example of the problem.
They do. The language used is incredibly strong. It's described as simultaneously the most expensive, the least efficient, and the least effective healthcare system in the developed world.
Wow. They even call it, what was it, the devil's trifecta?
That's the phrase used, yeah. It implies failure on every key metric: cost, efficiency, and results.
And the facts are clear. Americans spend the most per person globally.
By a lot, apparently. Almost 3 times what Britain spends per capita, and nearly 5 times what Canada spends. Nobody else comes close.
Yet, for all that spending, the outcomes, the actual health of the population, are worse than many other developed nations.
Some of the worst, according to the facts. It's a terrible return on investment, if you think about it purely in those terms.
And it's not just system-level costs, right? It hits individuals hard.
Oh, absolutely. The facts give examples.
Yeah.
Insulin, maybe $20 in Canada, but around $300 in the U.S.
$300 for insulin.
Yeah. Or an MRI scan. Average cost in the U.S. back in 2015 was over $1,100. Compare that to Australia, $215, or Spain, around $181.
That difference is just astronomical for the same scan.
It illustrates the price issue vividly, but then there's the inefficiency factor the facts bring up.
Right, the least efficient part of the trifecta.
Get this. The facts state that over 1/3 of all U.S. healthcare spending goes just to administration.
1/3, just on paperwork and bureaucracy.
More than what's spent on preventative care and long-term care combined, according to the facts.
That really challenges the whole private sector is always more efficient argument, doesn't it?
It directly counters it in this context. The facts argue that private profit-driven systems create perverse incentives. Drug companies want to charge the absolute maximum possible.
And hospitals, dealing with private insurers, are incentivized to maximize billing, maybe order more tests. It's not necessarily about the most efficient care path.
That's the picture painted by the facts, a system geared towards revenue generation for various private entities, not necessarily optimal health outcomes or cost effectiveness for the public.
And the consequences for ordinary people. The facts detail those too, I assume.
They do, and they're severe. Things that are free in Britain, like giving birth, can cost tens of thousands in the U.S.
Tens of thousands. Just to have a baby.
Which leads to people avoiding care. The facts say almost half the U.S. population admits to skipping doctor visits they knew they needed because of cost concerns.
Half the population putting off necessary care due to fear of the bill. That's deeply concerning for public health.
And that fear isn't irrational. Medical bills are tied to over 60% of personal bankruptcies in the U.S.
60%. And the facts mention this is often even for people who have health insurance.
Exactly. That's a crucial point. Having insurance, which is already expensive, doesn't even protect you from financial ruin in many cases.
It's unbelievable. The facts mention cost like $10,000 a day for a hospital stay.
Yep, and average deductibles tripling since 2006. Meanwhile, the facts point out, healthcare CEOs are making $20 million salaries, and insurance companies are posting record profits.
It paints a picture of a system where the money flows upwards, while patients face crippling costs and potential bankruptcy.
There's an anecdote in the facts that really drives home the psychological impact. An American living in the UK, her friend passes out. Her immediate ingrained reaction, hesitation to call an ambulance because she instantly worried if her friend could afford it.
Wow, that instinct, trained by the U.S. system. Even when she's in the UK, where it would be covered.
Right. The facts describe this as a weird way to live, being conditioned to equate emergency medical needs with potential financial ruin, and that Americans are trained to accept this as normal.
That story really captures the human cost, the anxiety baked into the system, beyond just the dollar figures.
Okay, let's shift focus a bit. Let's talk about work, work-life balance, and the support systems around employment. The facts state pretty clearly, Americans work longer hours than people in any other rich country.
Yeah, that's a well-known statistic. But the facts here offer a reason why.
Right. It's not presented as some kind of cultural choice, like Americans just love working all the time.
No, the facts argue it's driven by necessity. The phrase used is stark. People work those hours because they don't want to starve or freeze or die.
Wow. So it implies a lack of basic security. That constant hard work is just the baseline for survival for many.
That seems to be the implication. And it connects directly to another point the facts make. The U.S. has the least generous support systems among wealthy nations.
Least generous job support, family benefits, unemployment. Is that right?
All of the above, according to the facts. And it highlights that the U.S. is one of the very few countries on Earth with no guaranteed paid vacation time.
None at all federally.
No federal guarantee. And no guaranteed paid leave for new parents either.
So long hours combined with minimal safety nets if you lose your job, get sick, or have a child.
Exactly. It creates a situation with very little buffer. The facts argue this lack of basic support, this deprivation in the midst of such national wealth, could explain a lot of social problems.
Like what?
Things like fraying communities, rising depression, even suicide rates. The argument is that the constant stress and lack of security take a heavy toll.
That's a powerful connection the facts are drawing. And when you compare this to what the facts say about other countries, the contrast is pretty dramatic.
Take Italy, for example, based on the facts. Workers get a lot of paid vacation. We're talking 30, 35 days typically, plus national holidays, plus maybe a city holiday.
Okay, that's already way more than the U.S. average, let alone the guaranteed minimum.
And get this, getting married, 15 days paid honeymoon leave, according to the facts. Plus, they have this 13th salary paid in December.
A whole extra month's salary.
Yep. And the facts note Italians often see that as their vacation fund, essentially, since regular pay covers the bills. One anecdote even mentioned Italy basically shutting down for August with workers paid. Something like 8 weeks total paid vacation in that specific case mentioned.
8 weeks paid. It's hard to even imagine that in a U.S. context where 0 is the legal floor.
And Germany offers another interesting contrast in the facts. Workers might put in maybe 36 hours a week, but get paid for 40.
So shorter actual work hours.
Generally, yeah. And the facts note they usually don't need second or third jobs. They leave work earlier, have more free time.
And wasn't there something about spas?
Ah, yes. That fact was amazing. The German healthcare system can apparently prescribe a free 3-week spa stay if a worker is overly stressed.
A free 3-week spa stay prescribed by a doctor.
That's what the facts claim.
Yeah.
It reflects a totally different view, right? Where worker well-being is seen as a collective good, even benefiting the company because healthy workers are more reliable.
Definitely a different philosophy than the constant pressure described in the U.S. parts of the facts.
And interestingly, despite Americans working so many more hours, the facts state they aren't actually much more productive than Italians.
Really?
Yeah, both countries are listed in the top 15 most productive. It suggests just working longer doesn't automatically equal more output.
Huh. And the facts also touched on how central work is to identity.
Right. The Argentina example.
Right.
Asking, what do you do, might get you, I breathe air, I eat food. Implying, work isn't the only thing that defines a person, which the facts suggest might be more common in the U.S.
Yeah.
All right, shifting from work to where people live. Housing. The facts really dig into the affordability crisis in the U.S.
Yeah, it's mentioned as being particularly bad since around 2019, but now it's just constant headline news, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the facts provide some really dramatic historical comparisons to show just how much harder it's gotten.
Okay, lay those numbers on us.
So back in 1974, median income was about $11,100. Median home price, around $37,200.
Okay, so the home cost about 3.3 times the annual income. Seems manageable.
And the facts calculate you needed an income of about $600 a year to afford that median home back then.
Right. Now fast forward to 2024.
Median salary is around $59,000. But the median home price, it's exploded to $417,700.
Whoa. Okay, that's 7 times the median salary now.
Exactly. And with current interest rates, the facts mentioned 6.75% specifically, you now need an annual income of over $104,000 to afford that median home.
Over $100K income needed for a median home, and the median income is under $60K. That math just doesn't work for most people.
It really highlights the disconnect. Wages haven't kept pace at all with housing costs over the last 50 years, according to these numbers.
So what's driving this, according to the facts? Is it just supply and demand?
The facts argue it's more complex and, frankly, more cynical than that. One point raised is about large home builders.
What are they accused of doing?
The facts suggest some are deliberately holding back inventory, building slower than they could, to keep prices artificially high. Treating housing like a commodity to maximize shareholder profit, not as essential shelter.
So, manipulating the market for profit.
Yeah.
The facts name names.
Yeah, Pullet Group and Lennar are mentioned as examples, posting huge profits while blaming things like supply chains for the high prices.
And what else contributes?
Another big factor highlighted is builders selling large chunks of new homes directly to institutional investors, especially in popular areas like the Sun Belt.
So corporations buying up houses before individuals even get a chance.
That's the claim. It takes those homes off the market for regular buyers, making the shortage even worse. The facts estimate the U.S. is short somewhere between 3 and 7 million affordable homes.
That's a massive shortfall. And where does Wall Street fit in?
The facts mention the rise of build-to-rent communities. Big investment firms building entire neighborhoods specifically to rent out, not sell.
So marketed as a solution, but the facts argue they're actually designed to prevent homeownership.
Essentially, yeah, locking people into renting permanently from corporations, capitalizing on the fact that buying is out of reach. It's framed as a pretty controversial, profit-driven move.
The facts even mentioned issues with tiny homes.
Yeah, just briefly, pointing out some bad actors in that industry, uncertified builders, taking deposits and disappearing, using fake photos. It shows the desperation people feel and how vulnerable that makes them.
And it's not just people trying to buy, right? Existing homeowners are getting squeezed too.
Absolutely. As home values shoot up, so do property taxes. And property insurance rates are soaring. A $500 increase is mentioned as one example.
Which can make it unaffordable, especially for people on fixed incomes like seniors.
Exactly. The facts refer to this as a potential silver tsunami. Older homeowners forced out, widening that gap between the housing haves and have-nots.
And how are the haves responding, according to the facts?
The argument is that the main solution being offered by those controlling housing is basically more renting, rent from us.
Yeah.
Rather than focusing on creating genuinely affordable paths to ownership.
Which goes against that core idea the facts mention. Everybody deserves an affordable place to live.
Precisely. It sets up a real tension.
And the facts connect this housing instability to the wider financial stress we saw during the pandemic?
Yes, very strongly. Millions lost jobs, suddenly couldn't pay rent or mortgages. The facts mention those striking images of food bank lines.
In wealthy suburbs, yeah, with luxury cars waiting for food.
It showed how precarious things were for so many. Businesses failed, restaurant owners losing life savings, farmers selling off equipment.
And the eviction crisis. The facts detail that.
Extensively. Landlords threatening people, sometimes over just a couple of months' rent, courts swamped, people literally put on the street.
There was that story from Kansas City.
Yeah, very emotional. The tenant getting evicted, then blacklisted from renting for 7 years, according to the facts. The locksmith being completely unsympathetic.
Just a brutal situation, though some charities helped.
They did. The facts mention an association paying most of one tenant's debt. But the scale was overwhelming. Facts from that time suggested up to 40 million tenants could face eviction.
40 million. Out of 108 million renters. That level of insecurity is hard to fathom. It really challenges that dream narrative.
Okay, let's pivot to something really personal. Safety. And the idea of freedom. The facts bring in perspectives from Americans living abroad here.
Yeah, and some of these accounts are quite powerful. They suggest some expats carry a kind of trauma or at least heightened anxiety related to their experiences back in the U.S.
Like that story from Warsaw.
Right. The American on a tram sees a guy hiding something, instinctively assumes it's a weapon. Turns out it was just a beer can. And she bursts into tears, realizing how conditioned she was by fear from living in the U.S.
That's intense. And the one in Australia. Conditioned to tell the difference between fireworks and gunshots. Having a visceral reaction to loud bangs because of that learned association.
The facts compare that to veterans with PTSD reacting to fireworks.
Exactly. And it explicitly links this conditioning to the prevalence of mass shootings, calling them a uniquely U.S. phenomenon among developed nations.
It's gotten so bad, the facts say, that other countries are actually issuing travel warnings about the U.S.
Yes, warning their own citizens about gun violence risks when visiting America. That's a significant statement.
And how does this compare to how expats feel elsewhere?
The contrast is sharp, according to the facts. People talking about feeling safe walking alone at night in Valencia, Spain, feeling less paranoid in Portugal, ranked one of the safest countries. Or Zurich, Switzerland, statistically super safe.
The overall message seems to be that the level of violent crime common in the U.S. just isn't a daily reality in Europe.
That's the clear contrast presented in the facts, which leads into the whole concept of freedom.
Right. The land of the free, it's central to American identity.
But the facts bring in the Human Freedom Index. And on that ranking, the U.S. isn't top 10, not even top 20. It's ranked 15th.
15th. That definitely challenges the slogan. And the facts connect this to incarceration.
Directly. The U.S. ranks #1 globally in the total number of people locked up and has the highest incarceration rate.
Higher rates than where?
The facts mention higher rates of police killings than Angola and Sudan, which is startling.
Wow. And what about guns and freedom? That's always a big part of the U.S. discussion.
The facts note the U.S. is one of only 3 countries with a constitutional right to bear arms. And Americans own almost half of all civilian guns worldwide, way more per person than anywhere else.
Which ties right back to the gun violence and safety concerns we just talked about. It's a complex loop.
Definitely. And the facts even touch on freedom of assembly, like protests.
The Argentina example.
Yeah. An expat feeling more free protesting there because police weren't heavily managing or, cracking down on protesters, which the facts contrast with common experiences of police brutality during protests in the U.S.
So all these factual points build towards a deeper critique of freedom in the U.S.
They do. The facts introduce this really provocative idea that the freedom offered might actually be a kind of sophisticated form of modern slavery.
Slavery? How so?
Not literal chains, but slavery through debt, through obligations, through the illusion of choice. Another phrase used is a new form of slavery based on deadlines, debt, and constant dopamine hits from consumption and media.
That's a heavy critique. Does it connect to philosophy?
It does, drawing on interpretations presented in the facts. It mentions Nietzsche's slave morality, the idea that powerless groups might start valuing obedience and endurance as virtues because those are the only values available to them, reframing powerlessness as goodness.
Applying that to accepting difficult aspects of American life.
That seems to be the suggestion in the facts. And it also brings in Machiavelli.
How does he fit in?
His idea, as presented, is that power works best when people believe they're choosing their fate, even while tangled in a web of obligations debt. Work demands that keeps them consuming and prevents them from questioning the system.
So freedom as an illusion that maintains control.
That's the powerful, critical lens these facts apply to the concepts of freedom and the American dream itself.
All right, let's shift gears to something absolutely fundamental: food, what we eat. The facts suggest this is another area of stark contrast between the U.S. and elsewhere.
Yeah, the perspective from expats here is pretty blunt. Some say they actually gain weight or feel sick when they return to the U.S., specifically because of the food.
Sick from the food? That's a strong claim. What's the reasoning given in the facts?
One source in the facts uses incredibly strong language, basically describing the output of the U.S. food industry as poison.
Poison? Wow. Okay, what's the factual basis for such a harsh description?
The facts point to regulation, or lack thereof. They state the FDA allows many chemicals in food processing and packaging that are banned elsewhere. Chemicals that leach into the food.
And these chemicals are linked to health problems.
Potential links to cancers, other chronic illnesses, according to the facts presented. And they illustrate this by pointing to typical American diets.
Like what kind of foods?
Things like Pop-Tarts, Little Debbie snacks, mac and cheese with hot dogs, lots of sugary drinks like Coke, presented as examples of the widely consumed, highly processed fare.
So the argument is that U.S. obesity isn't just about individual choices.
Exactly. The facts argue it's often a food problem, rooted in the industry's practices, the ingredients allowed, and crucially, the lack of access to affordable, healthy options for many people.
It's easier to blame individuals than regulate the industry.
That's the implication in the facts. Changing laws is hard and potentially less profitable for corporations than just focusing on personal responsibility narratives around obesity.
And how does this compare to Europe, according to the facts?
The contrast is stark. What Americans might call expensive gourmet foods are just considered normal, everyday quality in Europe.
So basic, healthy food is the norm there, not a premium luxury.
That's the picture painted. In the U.S., fresh, healthy food is often priced significantly higher, making it inaccessible for many. Whereas in Europe, the facts say agriculture is often subsidized differently, helping keep healthy food affordable.
And the ingredients themselves.
Huge difference noted in the facts. More than half the GMOs and chemicals common in U.S. foods are simply illegal in Europe. Banned.
Banned entirely. That's a massive regulatory gap.
It is. And this difference leads to that really strong framing in the facts, describing the U.S. situation, allowing these substances, making unhealthy food the cheapest option as potentially a crime against humanity.
That phrase really lands hard. It suggests the consequences are seen as incredibly severe and systemic.
It definitely paints a picture of two very different systems with fundamentally different priorities regarding food safety and public health. So pulling all these threads together, the healthcare issues, the work-life struggles, housing, safety, food, the facts really culminate in this direct critique of the American dream itself.
Suggesting it's not what it's cracked up to be, or maybe even a lie.
For many, yes. That's the argument presented in some of these facts. The initial promise is so ingrained right. Work hard, Get your degree, play by the rules.
And you'll be rewarded. Upward mobility, stable life, the classic narrative.
But the counter-argument running through these facts asks, what if that promise was never meant for everyone? What if the system itself is broken in ways that make achieving that dream impossible for huge numbers of people?
And the facts we've discussed are used as evidence of that brokenness.
Exactly. Look at the financial stress. Average American spending $1,600 a year on coffee, but less than a quarter saving for retirement. 40% can't cover a $400 emergency.
Banks making billions in overdraft fees, 60% of bankruptcies linked to medical bills, even with insurance.
The facts argue the system seems set up to penalize poverty, while financial literacy isn't even widely taught. It implies keeping people in the dark about debt benefits certain interests.
Then there's the education piece, the debt trap, as the facts call it.
Yeah. College tuition up 1,200% since 1980, wages up only 236%. It's completely out of sync.
So graduates start life 37K in debt on average.
For degrees that 40% aren't even using in their jobs, according to the facts. You see bloated admin costs at universities, adjunct professors barely scraping by.
And the contrast with the past, a summer job used to cover tuition. Now it takes insane hours at minimum wage just for tuition.
The facts explicitly label it a trap, designed to burden young people. And this is, while dozens of other countries offer free university, viewing it as a public good, not a debt sentence. Remember that expat moving to Slovenia?
Right, for free education they couldn't afford in the U.S.
Then the housing crisis adds another layer, taking 80 hours of work for 1 month's rent versus 30 hours back in '85.
Corporations owning nearly half the rentals in big cities. No state where minimum wage covers a basic apartment.
The facts argue housing is being hijacked by Wall Street, turned into permanent rental assets, killing the dream of ownership for many.
And the wealth inequality stats? Those are just jaw-dropping.
Aren't they? Richest 1% owning more than the entire middle class. Since 1980, the bottom half gained maybe $700 per adult in wealth, while the top 1% gained $1.7 million each.
CEO pay 350 times the average worker, up from 20 times. The richest 3 people owning more than the bottom 160 million.
The facts call it a chasm, a fundamental break from the idea of shared prosperity.
The facts also brought up this idea about the illusion of purpose.
Yeah, that was fascinating. The intense societal pressure in the U.S. to find your one big purpose. But the facts suggest this search itself can be a trap.
How so? Leading to stress and disappointment.
Exactly. And that maybe real freedom comes from stopping the search, living fully now, creating meaning daily, not chasing some grand elusive goal imposed from childhood.
Which connects back to the hustle culture.
Right. Pressure to always be productive, available, grateful, linked again in the facts to that modern slavery idea driven by debt, the illusion of choice.
And that disturbing Amazon anecdote.
Urinating in bottles because breaks aren't adequate. Used in the facts as an extreme example of human needs being totally secondary to work demands.
Finally, the facts point fingers at the political and media systems, saying they make things worse.
Yeah, arguing government is often designed to protect parasitical middleman industries, healthcare, finance, etc., that extract profit without adding value.
Government described as fractured, dysfunctional, 2 parties not serving the people, driving extremism, lobbies pushing corporate agendas, corrupt politicians.
That's the assessment in the facts. And then the media mainstream outlets like Fox and CNN cited, plus social media are accused of prioritizing clicks and outrage over truth.
Creating a nation of misinformed people fighting over lies.
A major problem, the facts argue, exacerbated by the global reach of U.S.-based platforms.
And this all ties back to that feeling expats described, the American trauma or PTSD.
Yes, carrying the stress and anxiety of that system even when they leave. The facts suggest it's a kind of messed up conditioning that people have been trained somehow to accept as normal. It's a powerful indictment of the cumulative effect of all these issues. So, as we sort of bring this all together, let's quickly recap some of the alternative approaches highlighted in the facts from other countries. Not as perfect solutions maybe, but as factual contrasts.
Right, just based purely on the facts presented. Healthcare, for instance, we saw affordable, often free access in the UK, Canada, France.
Leading to better health outcomes, according to the facts, despite costing less than the U.S. system.
Work-life balance was a huge one. Italy's massive vacation time, that 13th salary.
Germany's shorter work week, paid spa breaks for stress. The basic idea of guaranteed paid leave for vacations and parents, which is standard almost everywhere else. Less need for multiple jobs, more time for life.
Education, too. Finland prioritizing well-being, shorter days, less homework so kids can be kids.
And the big one, Free university tuition being common elsewhere. Slovenia, Germany, France, Finland, Norway, Canada mentioned. Education as a public good, not a debt trap.
Safety felt like a clear difference in the facts. Lower violent crime, lower gun violence in places like Portugal, Spain, Switzerland, Europe generally.
Expats actually feeling safer walking around. A different baseline level of security.
Food quality was another striking contrast. Normal food in Europe being higher quality, less processed than standard U.S. food.
Agriculture subsidized for affordability, way fewer harmful chemicals and GMOs allowed. That fundamental difference in regulation and priority.
And then some different societal or governmental approaches were mentioned.
Right, like the facts about less confrontational policing during protests in Argentina, different cultural attitudes towards work centrality in Argentina, Iceland's we versus me mindset mentioned.
And places where politicians actually stepped down based on popular will, like Tunisia in the example given.
Iceland had some really specific, interesting examples in the facts, too. Prosecuting bankers after the crisis, not just bailouts. Turning financial decisions over to women.
And those gender quotas on corporate boards, 40% minimum for both men and women.
Yeah, presented in the facts as leading to real culture change. Focusing on broader stakeholder interests. Women in leadership framed as bringing a different ethical perspective, seeking peace.
The facts mention Icelandic women striking for equal value, too, setting an example.
And Tunisia, legal abortion since '73, family planning supporting equality, women central to their revolution fighting for rights in the Constitution.
And that point about politicians there agreeing to abide by the people's will and step down voluntarily, plus encouraging cultural curiosity using the internet for learning.
These aren't presented as miracle cures, but they are factual examples included in the source material of different choices societies can make about core values and structures, offering a wider lens on how things could be organized. #outro. So after diving through all these facts, the picture that emerges is complex, isn't it? On one side, this incredible, unprecedented wealth in the United States.
But on the other side, these facts detail significant systemic struggles for many citizens. Healthcare costs, housing affordability, work-life pressures, even safety concerns that seem less acute in other, sometimes less wealthy, nations.
Yeah. And it really forces a hard look at that central concept, the American dream. Is it the beacon of opportunity it's held up to be?
Or, as many of these facts seem to argue, has it become an illusion for too many? A promise the current system makes incredibly difficult, maybe even impossible to fulfill, perhaps even a kind of deception.
It leaves you with some big questions to wrestle with. Thinking about all the facts regarding debt, work hours, the potential illusion of choice, what does freedom really feel like in your day-to-day life?
Or maybe the final thought, based on what we've discussed from the facts, is this. Is real contentment found by chasing that big, singular, often elusive societal goal? Or is it found perhaps in cultivating presence, creating your own meaning, and just living fully right here, right now?
Definitely something to mull over. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive recorded today here at KPP Team Studio.